I believe papers were passed back to all of you. I'd like to show you something. Many of you declined to purchase the review CD. I want to show you what's on there in case you'd like to change your mind. Please look up. When you open your CD, you'll see this. One folder and one Microsoft Word document that says, please read. Hey Gabe, could you please stop distracting Julia?
Yeah.
In the PowerPoint slideshows folder, you'll see current book chapters, old book chapters, and then all of these. These are thematic reviews. An atlas of famous places, like you already did for your maps. A review of the mandatory chemistry, common errors that students make, laws and policies, a really long slideshow of like the key terminology of the exam, and a review of species of importance. I'll show you what some of those look like. I think this is one of the most useful. This is the common errors. First, common errors about taking the exam. That may not be that useful. Then, common errors about context. So, little reminders. Make sure that you know the difference between those, the difference between those, so on. You can see that most of these are set up as single pages or as question answer. There's one of those for the mandatory chemistry. This one's formatted kind of wacky. See the numbers show up as a separate layer? I don't know why that is. Here's another one, the laws. There's about 35 or 36 U.S. and international laws. You can see that the title comes up and then the description separately. Then, in addition to those thematic reviews, there's a review of our current book by chapter with new material by unit. So you can go to Unit 7, for example, and see the material that either wasn't in your book or there's a different term for it. Like, hey, I never heard about this guy, but yeah, he's kind of famous. And different ways to think about stuff, and like, I never learned about this type, but I never knew that word, or like, what's that got? You know, little facts and stuff that weren't in the unit. Again, new material for each of the 11 units, plus all the chapters for the whole book, plus the same thing for the old book, in case you wanted to review in a different manner. Remember, you can either put these on Google Drive and then use the Drive app to flip through them whenever you are in reception/Wi-Fi. Or you can carry over individual slideshows to your portable electronic device and then use PowerPoint or Keynote or some other slideshow software to flip through like flashcards. You can print them out on paper, I guess, and make little paper cards if you want to carry them. And I sell these for $1, which, remember, is coincidentally a fundraiser for my end-of-the-year AIDS barbecue. Whatever students donate, I'll match to feed my student AIDS. And speaking of this, I don't know if you guys are aware, but Argentinians are kind of obsessed with barbecue. And I'm not very good at it, but I'm very ambitious. So for my student aids, I make like a 7-course barbecue with like vegetarian stuff, fish stuff, and red meat, and white meat, and all kinds of stuff. And Just saying, if you ever wanted to be a student aide for somebody next year, I might feed you pretty well at the end of the year. Just saying. Okay. Are there any questions about the CD, the content of the CD, or anything else? Yeah, sure. Yeah, I have at least this many, and I can make more. So even after I run out, there'll be more. But if you want to buy one, come and get one now, I guess. And I have change if you change. Big. It just says, hey, it's
Wow, thank you.
Yeah.
You in Northern
Got it. Where to keep this? Yeah.
First goal will be distracted so we can put it in the ball, and then
In a book.
Students, if your disk is corrupted, please let me know. They have a failure rate about 1 in 50. The chief blanks, and so let me know if it doesn't work for you. I'll give you a free one.
no.
Yeah, I'm not.
Doctor would give me it.
I'm not down.
No, I'll take the change. Check it out, kids.
What grade do you guys have in Dr. Wood's class?
I got me what we call
Well, a bankroll.
a rhino roll. Once in a while, we'll be your guy. Okay.
I applaud it. I don't know.
Now, students, I'd like to change gears, please. And most students eventually rush to catch up with me. It may benefit you to be all on the same page. Please take out your hints for doing well on the APES exam packet. I'd like to show you a bunch of stuff in there. You'll need to take notes on it. This thing. If you're a jerk and suck like life, you can pull a Nicholas or a Carlton and waste more paper. But you will need one. Granite. Rockman. Freedom. Is it Freedom? Is it Freedom? You're having Freedom? St. John. Those are very similar questions with some, like, conceptually similar with different words. So if you look at 2013, 2012, and 2011, there's a bunch of, like, pollution traveling to the rivers and, like, stuff like that. Oh, yeah, I mean, the content is always the same. Oh, for sure. It's just that the answer isn't really worth memorizing. What you need to do is practice finding the content of your brain. Okay. We have something else after this, and we're a little bit slow today. It's surely my fault. First, please look up. You have a two-sided page that I gave you at the beginning of the year. This is not new to you. I've just given it to you again. It was in the 5 days at the beginning of the year, so here it is again, now that we're on the tail end. Doesn't it feel good to be, like, so much coursework behind us? Like, you gotta admit, we've been through a lot of content. Like, compared to classes where you're, like, still doing the same concepts, like, it's sort of a lot of stuff, right? Okay. Next, there's this page. called H Review Sheet 1, which is the information about the course as the College Board promises. You'll notice, please check your paper, interdependence of the Earth's systems is a quarter of the course, as they recommend at the College Board. Human population dynamics is 10%. Ownership, use, and degradation is 15%. Environmental quality is 20 to 25%. Global changes and their consequences is 15 to 20. And environment and society is 10%. That means that out of 100 multiple choice questions, they'll be distributed like this. Out of 40 points possible on the essay, they'll be distributed roughly like this.
Wait, there's only 40 points for the entire essay?
Because there are 4 questions that are each 10-point format. So it's the same format as our unit exams, but there's 4 of those. Each of our unit exams is exactly 1/4 of the AP test.
But there's 100 multiple choice.
That's right, because it would take 25.
Choice worth a lot more than the essay.
Ah, sorry, those points aren't weighted equally with 60-40 split. Now, I've tried my best to keep our class distributed like this. And I think I'm probably, within 10 or 20% of that distribution. It's hard to be exactly right. But I think, I think that the energy cycle of matter, solid earth, atmosphere, biosphere has been about a quarter of the class. It's stuff about energy and conversions and water and major nutrients and so on. That's about a quarter. And then human population dynamics, that was about 10%, roughly. And the stuff about the resources and water and mineral and stuff, that's been about 15%. I think that for the most part, you got the class that they wanted me to give you, roughly. Except the very last one, environment and society, that's probably my biggest weakness, just so you know. When I looked this over, I realized, dang it, I really haven't spent 10% of our class on economic forces, cultural, aesthetic, environmental ethics, laws and regulations, issues and options. Sorry about that. I didn't make that 10% of our class. That's my biggest weakness. Here and there. And then, where you look at number 4, environmental quality, that's your biggest weakness. Just saying. Those are the questions where students have hemorrhaged the most points. And that is 20 to 25% of the exam. So those issues in particular, like the major pollutants, the effect of pollution, solid waste and disposal, issues on impact on human health, that's where you are the weakest. It was in your book, it was in my class, it is in your study guide, but I'm just saying that all of my periods, year after year after year, by the way, this is the one where high school kids struggle the most. Next is 5 pages of the most critical content. This is a 5-page, very tightly typed review. It has definitions, not endangered species, biomes, places, laws, and treaties. That's probably the single 5 pages that you'll need to study the most thoroughly. Those are like highlights of the exam. Probably 1/2 of the questions will feature some part of those 5 pages. Probably, maybe even more. Like, that's the real nitty-gritty. I mean, if you take all the 3-star terminology and stuff, that's it. The 3-star concepts, that's them.
How is this organized?
thrown together by some team of monkeys somewhere in the last 9 years of my career. Next is the APES Chemistry Review, 2 pages. That is mandatory chemistry. Good news, it's all right there. Just a 2-sided sheet of paper right there. That APES Chemistry, good news, is pretty concise and pretty straightforward. Bad news, you have to know every letter and number of that. For a lot of you, it's like, oh yeah, man, I got this chemistry, no big deal. And for some of you, it's like, well, I gotta, I get it 50%, it's not so bad, I can tough it out. But for some of you, if you don't speak any chemistry, you might want to sit with someone who can tutor you or help you with that. If that's a weakness for you, don't let it fall between the cracks. That is mandatory content for everybody taking the exam. Audrey?
They're not balanced, right? And we don't need to learn them.
That's right. That's right. Some of them may coincidentally be. Yeah, some of these are balanced. But anyway, they're not stoichiometrically balanced either.
Okay.
So a lot of these are shown as proceeding in one direction when they have back and forth, and some of them are tippy, and some of them are missing both key reagents and products. So these are the ingredients you have to know procedurally, not the equations, and for a chemistry sense. Next is the mathematics review. 1 page, 20 questions. These are the type of math they're going to make you do. No calculator. So I'm sorry that I forgot. I'm sorry. Don't say anything. Don't throw anything. I'm sorry I forgot. This was one homework point I forgot to warn you about. It's due on Thursday. Listen carefully. Listen carefully. Listen carefully. On blank or lined paper, you must set up and show you tried all 20 questions. If you don't get the right answer, there's no penalty. But you got to try all 20 questions. Show your work. If you get to the wrong answer, I want to see why you got the wrong answer. You got to try. At least put the numbers down on the paper, set it up. About the math. First of all, there is always one free response question that includes either math skills or the interpretation of numbers from a graph, or both. Like, what was the rate of change? When did it change the most? When did it change the least? What was the rate of that change? Something like that. And then, given some numbers, do the 1 or 2 mathematical things. So every single free response section has one question that includes math and chart, graph, data. Within the multiple choice, there are usually between 3 and 5 points based on some relatively simple math questions. These are the types of questions they ask: scientific notation, unit conversions, percentages, and energy. You don't have to solve all of these. You may not use a calculator, but I would like everybody to set them up and try your best. Even if you blow it, try your best. Yeah.
For the doubling time, it's doubling time equals 70 over percent. Was percent, say it was 60%, so is it
6.
70 over
60.
60?
Yeah, as a percent. Written as a percent.
Okay.
Okay, next. After the mathematics review, which is due Thursday for 1 homework point, that's not extra credit, that's homework. I'm sorry I forgot, I apologize, it was my mistake. There is a list of the 100 least wanted invasive species. This is just useful trivia. I don't know how much you should study, I'm sorry. I really don't know what to tell you, I don't know. Next, U.S. and international laws and treaties. This is mandatory. All you got to know is that one page, but you got to know it. Remember I told you I don't teach economics and law? Well, there it is. I taught it now. There's about 30 or 35
Question?
laws and treaties that you should know. That'll be about 5 to 10 points in the multiple choice, and usually like 1 to 2 points on the free response question, free response section. You do not need to memorize the year, but you got to know the title and what it did. And usually the title is a pretty good tip on what it does. Almost all of them tell you what they do in the title, with very few exceptions. So the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species is about international trade in endangered species, and it regulates it. So basically, if you remember the name, you're pretty much there. Okay, it's not that hard, but you got to know. Next comes an appendix of reference information for math. Everybody always asks me, write it down because this is the answer. Here's what they'll expect you to know. Mathematically, they expect you to know scientific notation, decimal / percentage, they expect you to know the common metric system, like millimeter, centimeter, meter, kilometer, the common metric system. They expect you to know units of time, second, minute, hour, day, week, month, year. They expect you to know basic length, area, volume. So in a line drawn from me to Kupiec, out to the window, how high would you have to make the pile for it to be 200 cubic meters? Basic length, area, volume. Not for like cones or for like a wavy plane. Finally, I think everybody already knows inches, feet, yards. 1236. Otherwise, everything else they'll give you. All the BTU conversions, the acres per mile, anything I didn't put on that list, to my knowledge, they would never expect you to know it. Cooking measurements, they would give you if they needed you to use them. Calories, horsepower, kilojoules. They don't need you to remember any of that except the ones I gave you on that list a second ago. Are there any questions about that? This appendix is supposed to help you do the math problems, but it has 2 typos. First, at the very, very top, you'll notice there's a 1 followed by 15 zeros, and below it, a 1 followed by 15 zeros. Everybody see that? The top one should have 3 more zeros, 18, because it's 10 to the 18. On the second page of the math appendix, please go to the second page of the math appendix. Right next to the center hole punch hole, it says 2 BTU, that should be a 1. On the second page of the math appendix, right next to the center hole punch, It says 2 BTU, that should be a 1.
The 2 should be.
Correct. So 1 BTU equals 0.000293 kilowatt hours. What?
BTU stands for?
British thermal unit. Next.
This is a miracle.
Please look at the experimental design. You might want to write this down. They have asked my students to design an experiment in the following questions. 2001, number 2, letter B. 2003, number 1, letter D as in dingo. Let me make sure I got this right. Hold on a second. I think 2005. No, I'm sorry. I was wrong about that last thing. There's nothing in 2005. And finally, in 2012, question 3A. I could have sworn there was one more. Maybe if I find it, I'll let you know later. Okay, so experimental design has come up 3 times, and I'm almost, oh yeah, and 1999, question 1B, sorry, 1999, question 1B, there it is. 4 different years, they've asked you to design an experiment. I kind of have a hunch they're going to ask you to do that this year. This is one of my hunches. My hunches are probably just better than 50-50. In 1999, question number 1, letter B, is about designing an experiment. You know what I'm saying? In the free response packet. So I just have a hunch they're going to ask you to design an experiment. It's a very common core sort of question. So you might want to practice those steps on those 4 questions. Answer the question, know your options, control experiment or observe, start with specific hypothesis, pick your variables, design your experiment, identify your controls, specifically identify what you will measure, describe how you will interpret your data, and check your work. Okay. Finally, the last paper in your packet, please look up, has a bunch of trivia about the places. Most of those are not that famous. They're really important, but not many people know about them. Aside from Chernobyl, most of these are not very well known. But please look up these 3 columns about what happened, what it did to human health, and what the current status is. Those, I think, are very useful. Remember I said that students' biggest weakness is environmental quality? Here are the 10 worst environmental quality disasters. So I think these would be really valuable for you. Are there any questions about that packet?
Are the sites in any order?
No.
So we should look at the problems of it, not necessarily that.
Correct. Can't hurt to know the places, but I don't think it's going to be on this one. Now, clear your desk except for one sheet of paper and a writing utensil. No cell phones or other distractions, please.
You right on the back of this?
What?
You right on the back of this?
Listen very carefully. I'm going to do my best to convince you of something about how you take the AT tests. All I ask of you is that you focus for about 5 minutes on 3 completely trivial tasks. I will not be collecting this paper.